Hi there. In this video, we will see how we can connect our CSV with pygeoapi so that we can expose our CSV data using OGC API features. You can read more about it on docs.pygeoapi.io under data publishing and under publishing vector data to OGC API features. Now, if you see this table, you will see checkboxes and cross marks for various different providers for various different properties. For example, as a CSV, we can use property filters or we can display it within pygeoapi itself, but we cannot run queries such as bbox, datetime, sort by. We can do skip geometry, but we cannot do CQL and transaction. Now we will see what these things are when we actually implement it. Now to get started, I will open my VS Code where I have my example config.yaml file. If you are using a default setup available by pygeoapi, you will see that the first resource is in fact a CSV based provider. That means there is this test folder which has data folder which has obs.csv. This is the file. So this is the data that we already have. Now for the sake of video, I have also created this one more file which has ID, quantity, lon and latitude. Now at this point of time, it is mandatory to have longitude and latitude as a separate field. If you have WKT, you cannot use that, but that does not mean that we cannot create our own provider. We will have a separate video about how to create our own providers further in this series. For now, what we will try to do is we will try to expose this points CSV data using pygeoapi. Now to do that, first of all, I will simply copy this readily available OBS resource. Make sure that you are following the correct spacing, otherwise you might face errors. So the first thing is I will change the ID of my data. So let's go with point and I can give some basic title, observation points, my cool observation points, and these are all metadata that you can attach to your data. So for example, I can have one more keyword as points. I don't need linked data, and under links I will just keep one link which will be a custom just for me to show you that this link will exist when we publish this particular data set. Now extent. Now I know that my data is going to be in Indian region. So what I can do is I can simply grab a extent and I can roughly give this extent. And since my data is in EPSG 4326, I will keep the CRS same. I don't have any temporal values, so I will simply comment this or I can delete this, and finally I will change the path of my data. In my case, my data is under test data and points.csv, so I will simply change this. Now we have to give couple of more information such as the ID. So for example, I will consider ID as an ID, and for geometry my x field will be lon and y field would be lat. This is very important that we need to specify x and y field. Alright, now our setup of adding CSV is done. Now what I will do is, I will now create OpenAPI spec document one more time and I will then run my pygeoapi server. Now if I head over to localhost 5001, because that is where I am running my pygeoapi, you will see that under collections I have one more collection which is observation points with the description my cool observation points. Now I can click on it and you will see that now it is showing the extent that we have given. We can simply go to browse through the items of observation points, and this is where all the points will be. Now if I go back to the documentation, you can see that we are able to do property filters and we are able to do display. So display is obviously working, and now it's time to see property filters. Now here you can see that we cannot execute a special filter of bounding box, neither we can do date time or sort by, but we can do skip geometry and we can do a basic property filter. That means I can do something like qty is equal to 12 and it will only give me the result where qty is equal to 12. Similar to that, I can do something like 43 and it will give me the data which has 43. I can also do based on ID, where ID is, let's say, 3, and it will give me the data. But in terms of ID, we can simply also do something like this, which will actually give me the entire data of this particular ID. Now we can also see this data in a JSON format by adding f is equal to JSON to the string. Now to check out more about skip geometry, we will go to /items, which is essentially all the items available in our resource, and here we can pass something like and skip geometry is equal to true. By passing that, it will remove all the geometry and it will only keep the properties, that means the metadata. If I send it as false, which is the default one, I can get my data back. So you can refer to this table to understand for any particular provider what all different queries that can work by default. So this is how you can add CSV in your PyGeoAPI instance. Thank you.